everyone, welcome to today's discussion on accessibility in India, present scenario and scope, organized by National Association for the Blind, Delhi. My name is Muskan Soni and I work as the Communications Officer at NAB. I'll be moderating today's discussion. NAB Delhi has been a pioneer in initiating services for children with visual impairment and additional disabilities since 1979. It advocates the concept of integrated education for social fulfillment and dreams to embed computer education and assistive technologies into the lives of every visually impaired person. So, before we start today, I would like to give our listeners a little background on the importance of today's day. Today, we are celebrating the 11th GAAD, which is the Global Accessibility Awareness Day. The purpose of GAAD is to get everyone talking, thinking, and learning about digital access and inclusion. GAAD was originally inspired by a single blog post written by a web developer named Joe Devon back in 2011. In it, he called for developers to come together and work to bridge the accessibility gap by raising awareness and global standards. Devon then joined forces with Jennison Assumption to bring this day to life. GAAD has continued to grow each and every year and has now reached a stage where people hold virtual and in-person events in 6 continents across the world. So without further ado, I would like to welcome all our esteemed guests on the panel today. I'll start with Mr. RAKESH Paladugula. Rakesh sir is a product manager for accessibility at Adobe. He's a passionate accessibility specialist, advocate, mentor, and is very well known in the accessibility and disability industry globally. He has trained thousands of engineers and hundreds of designers on digital accessibility. A heartiest welcome to you, sir. Next, we have on the panel Mr. Amar Jain. Amar sir is a qualified advocate and has been a corporate lawyer. As part of his professional engagement, he has worked in the areas of contract management, deals involving both Indian and international capital markets, and banking and finance areas, respectively. Apart from his professional legal services, Amar sir is also working to empower persons with disabilities. Next on the panel, we have Mr. PRASHANT NAIK, who works as a manager with Union Bank of India. He's a national award recipient. He has immensely contributed in the area of banking accessibility and Talking ATMs for the blind in India. He has co-developed Talking ATM India, a web locator for finding the nearest ATM. He is an assistive technology trainer and has empowered hundreds of blind people working in the banking sector. I would like to thank you all for joining us today. We are very, very grateful to have you on the panel. I would like to start with Rakesh, sir. Sir, what does digital accessibility actually mean and how important is it in the present scenario? So,
Thank you, Muskan, for a warm welcome, and it is really um, wonderful to have Amar and Prashant here with me. I'm really obliged and happy to um, share the stage with all of you. Yes, digital accessibility is something that is definitely important in the current situation and how we see the COVID, post-COVID or COVID life, and everything is virtual. While we talk about anything related to accessibility, the first thing that comes to the mind is that this is something that is beneficial for persons with disabilities. For me, I believe it is useful for everyone. Probably accessibility in either any of the forms, digital or infrastructure, may probably help or make things possible for persons with disabilities, while it makes things easier for everyone. So, um, digital accessibility definitely is an important aspect of anything that we build. Either can be a website, mobile app, documents, or any other products that we use in our day-to-day life. Maybe a kiosk, or maybe a digital display on your washing machine, refrigerator, or any place. So how we feel, how we look at, usually we just quick example of you place your a, a washing machine on in your balcony or the where there is more light, And if that sunlight reflects on digital screen, and if it is not clear for you to read the features on the screen, it is problem for anyone irrespective of their challenge. But if it is kept in mind with accessibility, it makes life easier for everyone. So that's how I see digital accessibility. And to add, it is perfectly important, and I would say it is far more important than ever before, to have a digital presence, being a virtual life, or it can be a hybrid life, or how we look at the future of digital medium. Accessibility is definitely the area of concentration for every one of us.
Thank you very much, sir, for highlighting the importance of this for digital accessibility. I would like to move to Prashant, sir, now. Sir, where are we now in terms of digital accessibility in India? What is the present scenario of banking accessibility in changing the digital dynamics?
Thanks, Muskan, and thanks to National Association for the Blind Delhi for having such a event. It's very, very important to have awareness, and this is one of the important day, Global Awareness Accessibility Day, to do that. Regard to current scenario, I am very happy to share the very recent happening, that is the BIS, that is Bureau of Indian Standard, has notified the accessibility, the ICT accessibility standards, that is for Indian standards on accessibility, the part 2, that is requirement, which has just happened a few days ago, just maybe even 2-3 days ago. And prior to that, 2 months ago, they have notified part 1 for the ICT standards on accessibility. This is specific to Indian, and that was about the requirements. So now in the part 2, they have come out with the conformance. So this is a big happening, if you ask me, because to have in place Indian standard, which is mentioned in the Right to Person with Disability Act, as appropriate government should take steps to come out with the standards, which is now we can say in place, and this will really going to help us. And very important is this standards are harmonized with international standards. They are not like anything new, different. In fact, they have incorporated the regional languages. That part they have taken care. Otherwise, it is very much following the international web accessibility guidelines. So that is very important happening I wish like to share. Other, as per my understanding in the area of digital accessibility, working with bank and banking sector, is things are now happening, definitely happening compared to few years ago. I started working in the field of persons with vision impairment training and technologies way back in 2002. So I remember that era when I was handling the India's first cyber cafe for the blind, when technology, assistive technology, was just introduced in India, and people were even not having access to computers. Since then and today, 2022, 20 years of whole era I have gone through, where of course now assistive technology has developed much, which is used to be some barrier in last few years ago, but that is not the case. So technology wise, the assistive aids, assistive technology wise, we have much developed. Innovations are happening in that area. Where we are following still challenges is still we come across every day here and there about inaccessible apps and portals in all sort of areas, from transportation to of course banking area, financial services, to regular apps like for booking appointments for doctors and so on. So still accessibility is happening here and there. On, of course, we have Amar Jain here, and he and his friends are having mission accessibility, and Rakesh is around advocating for accessibility. As already mentioned, he is training many designer developer, but still organizations have not made part of the process. The accessibility is done, maybe somebody get influenced, somebody is able, motivated, the top bosses, and they carry out the work, but that is not sustainable work. So we are still having challenges, but now on the policy level, things are happening. Awareness level, like the event what we are doing today, or today, I'm very sure in India, many people at many levels, organizational level, NGOs level, this day is celebrated for spreading awareness. Trainings must be happening. So we need to carry on awareness, and we have to work towards making accessibility as part of the processes. Same thing what I mentioned about the challenges is at the banking level. Few apps are workable, usable, but none of the bank has claimed or have given the disclosure that they have conforming to the web accessibility guidelines, or things are like sustainable, like they, with the demand, with the complaint, they may make some website or app accessible or usable up to certain level, but that may not carry out with new updates. So that is how the scenario is. Just to summarize, good things are happening. Our people like Amar, Rakesh, and our NAB Delhi and many other stalwarts in our industry are advocating for accessibility. But on the ground level, things are still needs to change.
Okay, so thanks a lot for sharing that with us. Definitely, like on the policy level, as you pointed, things are happening, and on paper there is a lot of progress. But on ground, there is still a lot of scope, and companies, I think, need to come forward and advocate and implement accessibility on their company level. Sir, I would like to move to Amar sir now. Sir, what is the legal framework around accessibility in India?
Sure, Muskan, and that's a very important question, and that goes back to what Prashant was mentioning just now, that the implementation is quite patchy. So let's first turn to the legal framework. Under the Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act of 2016, the central government is empowered to frame rules for accessibility under Section 14, and that they had to notify within a specified time frame. On that front, what happened earlier was that there's something called as guidelines for Indian government websites that was initially adopted in 2009 and then were revised in 2018. That at present continues to be the legal framework that all and it is applicable to everyone, whether it is company, whether it is private, whether it is government, or whether it is a public undertaking, public sector undertaking. So if you ask me from a legal framework perspective, accessibility is applicable to all public facilities and services. The term is defined under the Act, and it includes whole host of services, including banking, finance, insurance, transportation, communication, so on and so forth. And it needs to be complied with by everybody, be it a private company or be it a government sector undertaking or a public sector undertaking. That ways, the responsibility to ensure compliance of accessibility is either with the relevant ministry, department, or it can also be designated to the appropriate domain regulator. So for instance, if we talk of banking, it's with RBI. If we talk of securities market intermediaries, then it's with SEBI. Similarly, all the regulators. If you talk of insurance, then it's with IRDAI. And if you talk of all the companies, whether it is public or private, then it's actually the Ministry of Corporate Affairs who has to take charge and ensure that all companies are in compliance with accessibility standard. There are a couple of things that I want to highlight on the legal framework. First is our law need to be changed. Our rules need to be amended to reflect the BIS standards that Prashant just mentioned about, part 1 and part 2, so that will become the law going forward, at least for sure. Second is, there are a couple of, with the advent in technology and with the whole aggregator business coming up, or with the whole startup business coming up, there are multiple app providers in India. To them, there is no specific law that governs. Like, for example, in case of a restaurant, you can still say that a Food Standards and Safety Authority of India governs them, right? Or in case of telecom, you can say Telecom Regulatory Authority of India governs them. But there are so many app providers which are existing in today. To them, there is no regulatory mechanism applicable to them apart from the normal business compliances. So we need to have Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology come forward and make this accessibility standard applicable across category of app providers, including those which are not governed by anybody. And once that happens, and once there are enough strong precedent of case laws, is when accessibility is going to be looked at as a serial legal compliance. Right now, the problem is, while there is law in place, while there is policies in place, but the compliance part of it, or the monitoring part of it, or the implementation part of it, that's quite patchy. Over to you, Muskan.
Thank you, sir, for sharing that with us. I'm sure our viewers would be highly benefited from it. Sir, continuing on this, I would like to ask you, what are the rights of a differently abled person when it comes to like accessibility?
Sure. That's for me, right?
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Okay, great. So, Muskan, if you look at it, every person with disability has a right of accessible services, and this is coming. If you look
Sir,
at
I'm
it,
sorry to interrupt you, but your video is not visible.
I'm so sorry.
Yes,
is it back?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Now.
Got it. So I'm saying, if you look at it from the Act perspective. Sorry, just give me one sec. Sorry, just. Sure. So, Muskan, if you look at it from the legal perspective, under the Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act, there are a couple of strong rights that persons with disabilities are entitled to. One of that is right of equality. Second is non-discrimination, right? And there are other rights, for example, financial independence, ability to be able to manage his or her own financial affairs. Accessibility per se has not been called out in the law as a right, but from the obligations perspective, it has been made very clear that accessibility is an obligation of every service provider that they need to comply with. That is as far as the law is concerned. But if you look at the judgments, if you look at the case laws of high courts and Supreme Court of India, most importantly, Rajiv Raturi's case, for instance, right of accessibility has been very well recognized under Article 21 of Constitution of India, which is right to life. So it's recognized under the law, or the Jija Ghosh judgment, for instance, where it has been very clearly spelled out that right of accessibility is part of right of life, and right of life, of course, provides you right of dignified survival. So in that sense, there is clear recognition under the law for accessibility as a right. Now, what happens when it gets violated? I think it's important to touch upon that that point, because there is a clear legal obligation on the service providers to comply with accessibility norms. Whenever there is a violation, any person with a disability or any other person who is working for the cause of persons with disability can approach either the state commissioner or the chief commissioner for persons with disability, depending on where the the service providers registered office or principal place of businesses. So there is, if you go to, for instance, I'm working on an initiative called Mission Accessibility with two other my friends who are lawyers, and we basically take the service providers through various routes, right from starting from writing to an email to social media outreach, and if it doesn't result into anything, then we take it legally. So for instance, Practo and Make My Trip are the two companies which are not at all accessible right now. So we have taken them to Chief Commissioner for Persons with Disability. Although their registered offices are in different states, but considering the impact that it has, the inaccessibility has all over India, we have invoked the jurisdiction of CCPD. So that's what you can do as a person with disability.
Okay, so thanks a lot for sharing that with us. I would like to move to Rakesh sir. Sir, how does accessibility or the absence of it affects education and employment?
So I don't see any hold on any aspect of life when it comes to digital accessibility. Um, Take for instance education. So we will be using, or the students will be using various aspects of digital presence while they are doing their education. Maybe books that are in different formats of maybe EPUBs or PDFs or docs or etc. Or they can be doing a registrations, online exams, etc. on web, or they might be attending trainings or sessions, classes on digital video meeting formats. So all of these have obligations, and the standards that we follow are WCAG, Web Content Accessibility Guidelines by W3C, Worldwide Web Consortium. And these standards are technology agnostic, can be applied across any digital medium, may it be a document, may it be a website, or may it be a conferencing tools. So what does it impact? So when I say about persons with disabilities, it could be any kind of challenges that may encounter by them. Say you take a example of this video that that will be going on YouTube, is perhaps not be comfortable for persons who can't hear if you don't provide captions to them.
Yeah.
So this is one thing, and when you look at live, maybe people might be looking this video live or maybe pre-recorded. In either of the cases, captions are required, and how you provide that technology, and how many of those video conferencing tools or the training softwares are providing that captioning, or how many of the um, online exam platforms really give that leeway for persons with disabilities to do the justice. Way back when I remember when I am going to school, when I'm going to when I was going to college, the biggest concern for me is not how I write the exam or what the questions come in, but the bigger concern is how do I read the question paper with the limited vision I have. How would it be if it is a gloomy day and it is so cloudy that I don't get enough sunlight into the classroom, so that I probably will not be able to read the question paper? How can I write my exam on a white sheet without getting it across the document? Or if it is a rolled paper, how would it be if it goes from one line to another? And though my knowledge of information is rightly put on the document, the concern is how I will be writing the exam, how I will be reading the question, and if it goes really pathetic on the paper, how does the how does the evaluator look at that and feels like at the first instance looking at the way of writing, he might not be interested to evaluate my question paper, evaluate my answer paper rather. So it's more psychological impact, and now the same applies to digital instance. If my screen reader does not read the question, or if it does not read out the options available, if there is no relation between the question and the answer text fields or the controls that I can choose from, if I'm not able to submit with my keyboard, if there is a video, if there are pictures that I need to look at and answer, are there enough sufficient information for me to understand what is being spoken or what is being visually represented? So these are the things that we need to consider on all aspects of disabilities. And this is what something that people who have drafted these standards have taken into consideration. And to add to that, what generally people think is give an additional time. That is what we are learned, right? When we are writing, if you are applied to be a person with disability, and you're writing exam, all that in many cases you get is an additional 20% of time to, or 20 minutes per hour as an additional time to write. It doesn't matter if you are not able to read the question paper. If you are given the whole day to write 2 questions, it doesn't matter if you are unable to read the question. So it's more about giving them the sufficient accommodation, sufficient ways to solve how you can comfortably write the exam. That is more important than giving additional time or a scribe for you, someone who can write on your behalf. Probably that is something useful or a short term or for now, but the long term solution or how we have to look at the problem is to how to solve it equivalently, and what a person without a disability gets is the same equality as what I as a person with disability would like to get.
So thank you. Yes, so thank you for sharing that with us. Definitely, we need to build more bridges rather than more, you know, like helping people to cross a river. I
Patches,
think,
yeah.
yeah, we need more bridges. Sir, as you talked about, like the scope and stuff, sir, I would like to ask Mr. Shant, sir, with so much of scope, with so much of gap in the, on paper and on ground accessibility, would you say there is there are increased number of career opportunities for people with disabilities, especially now? Prashant, sir.
Yes. As I mentioned in my earlier talk, definitely things are changing a lot with advancements of technologies. And on the job market scenario, yes, scope is there. One, because technologies are available. When I say technologies, it means my assistive technology. It may be as a person with low vision, or it may be as a person with vision impairment, even for other disabilities. Second thing, we are able to get education. There are our friends who have got a higher education because of support system now developed. Of course, we like a initiative like iSTEM, who are helping many of our friends to go for education in the area of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. There are organizations like NAB Delhi, Xavier's, many other across India who are providing material, accessible content for people to study those higher education fields, or Daisy Forum of India, which is one of the largest online library, also having a lot of material. So all this is there available, and they are adding more and more content which is accessible for better education. And with this education, people are getting good placements. We know there are good number of people having good positions in good MNCs. Of course, in last 10 11 years, huge number of visually impaired people have joined banking sector, and those who joined 10 years back today are they have promoted to the level of senior manager. So they are advancing in their career. Youngster freshers are, with their good education, are able to get jobs. There is a comparatively 15 years ago, 10 years ago, some level of awareness about there is some screen reader technology available, because people are using mobile, so people are aware about how visually impaired people are using mobile with the help of screen reader technology. This is one scenario on job scope and possibilities and opportunities. But remote areas, cities which are maybe in the category B or C, still reach is not there. That much support system is not there. People are still not able to get opportunities in employment, because those who are in the metro cities and surrounding and good cities, of course we get a lot of opportunities. So we want them to also reach and get job opportunities. So there are people, maybe people are not skilled. That is one more area where our they are having barriers in getting employment. Like today required skills are like soft skills, communication skills, language skills. So and if you add accessibility to this all, is when you actually get employment, then of course working on your desk with the given system of that particular organization, whether they are accessible, not accessible, or during the process of interviewed, written exam, as just now Rakesh mentioned about the whole examination scenario. Even there are people who are interviewing our person with disabilities may not be aware about it, may not be sensitized enough to ask questions which are more on the basis of their merit and education than questions for disability and etc. So there, because of that, people may not be getting opportunity to get job which they deserve. So on accessibility point of view, organizations need to have their in-house application accessible, make availability of the assistive technology for our friends who have those who are joining, and they also need to make the changes, adaptation in the process of employment, calling for the advertisement which is accessible, applications maybe through digital media, digital form, and then giving them the alternative options, reasonable accommodation during the interview process, and so on.
Thank you, sir, for sharing that with us. I think accessibility, as you pointed out, when we live in a metropolitan city, it's still like the scenario seems nice, but when we go towards tier 3 city or district areas, a lot of people are not even aware that, aware of even just about the existence of education for differently able people. And I think that's the area that as a nation we need to really work upon. And it's like definitely like a lot of credit goes to people like you who we have on the panel today, that so much awareness and so much development has been done in the sector of accessibility. So I would like to thank all the panelists that we have today. Thank you very much. And moving forward, I like, and also to conclude our discussion today, I would like to ask all of you on your views on like as an individual, what can we, a person who is not particularly in the sector of accessibility, who is not particularly aware about the developments in the accessibility sector, what can they as they do on an individual level to enhance or ensure accessibility in India? So let's start with Sir Amar, sir.
Sure, Muskan, and that's a very important question. And here, to answer this question, I'll also be excluding those who are not persons with disability. Let's talk of a general person, as a common man. What can we do to make things accessible? I think as an individual, we need to think of every single touch point that our life go through, whether it is when we go to avail a product, or when we go to avail a service, or when we avail a business offering. When either of these things happen, or when we do our day-to-day life or functional activities, when either of these things happen, right, what are the various touch points that we come across? And then think of people having different abilities, whether it is because of physical differences, whether it is gender differences, whether it is age differences, so on and so forth. Once you start thinking from that perspective, that attitudinal shift, I think that is very important. Once that starts happening is when you're going to think of multiple people. Like for instance, if there are steps in a building, just a few steps, 3, 4, 5 steps, right? We need to think of what if there are children, small children who are climbing up those stairs. Can we provide a small railing so that they can hold on to, or can it be a helpful railing for a senior citizen? Or can we give an alternative structure? Instead of the steps, could be a simple ramp, which could also allow people who are not able to walk and possibly are on wheelchair, whether because of disability or because of accident, also seamless access to our building or infrastructure. Similarly, when we talk of digital accessibility, right now what happens is we don't think from all persons' perspective. 10 years back, Alexa or Google Assistant wasn't thought of. But the minute it started coming into the market and the way it changed life of everybody, people from non-linguistic or non-affluent backgrounds, if I may call them, are also able to use Google Maps. Why? Because through the voice search, they're also able to ask for driving directions. Or people who don't know, who have linguistic barriers, are able to use things like Alexa, etc., or Google Assistant, because it works with multiple languages. So when we start thinking from different people's perspective and their problems, is when you go to start making things accessible. That's one. Second point, briefly, that I'm going to touch upon is that takes small steps. As I said, once you start thinking, then even if you put out a social media post with pictures, then make sure that you put meaningful image description so that people with blindness can also make sense out of it. When you're giving audio video content, make sure that you put out equal text description so that people with speech and hearing impairment are able to make sense out of it. So these are the small things that we should start with, and that's when you start thinking of accessibility from different perspectives.
Thank you, sir. Thanks a lot. I completely agree. We need a attitude shift towards,
Correct.
yeah. When we start thinking from every person's perspective, even the small things that we do in our everyday life, we'll start thinking about how different people would be affected by those activities, and how we can think more inclusively. Thank you for sharing that with us. I would like to have your opinion on the same, Prashant sir. So your audio is mute.
Right. So if I may add to what Amar has already mentioned, what as a personal capacity, everyone can contribute towards digital accessibility. There are many areas where we can contribute. As an individual, this is what my observations and submissions to all my fellow people, those who are listening. And I'm hoping this is not only for our users who are visually impaired or persons with disability, but this video may be also come across with people without disabilities. So there are types of people I'm hoping to have such videos come across during today's Global Accessibility Awareness Day, where we say that this is for thinking. Everybody should think about digital accessibility. Everybody should talk about digital accessibility. So when I say everybody, I mean to say we users. We are users of the different apps and websites and other kiosks. Maybe we have designers who are actual people who are designing. For that matter, if you take digital accessibility, a very important role is played by user UX UI, that is user experience and user interface designers. So how they design their product, this is the first stage. Then of course developers who are going to code the design. Just now Amar mentioned about putting alternate text or maybe having features of accessibility. So we want developers, and that is where the implementation comes into picture. Then capacity building for these developers, because they have to understand what is accessibility by learning about it, about WCAG guidelines. There are decision makers. Now this is very important. When we got some successes in the past or today, is because some top level people are able to understand and take the decision on implementing accessibility in their organization or in their particular products. So we want decision makers also to take the action on digital accessibility. And of course, very important is the government. As there are standards now, we want those standards to be part of the Right to Disability Act. We want government who is coming out with so many important applications under Atmanirbhar. So whether government is ensuring those are accessible, that is very important, because government has to come into picture and promote it, accessibility. Then if I come to the users like us who are finding difficulties in using app or websites, we definitely can demand for it with the concern owner of the application, concern organization. We can also write on their social media very initially to raise the voice. And Amar and his friends, the way they are handling mission accessibility and with the concept of structured negotiation. So even individual level, we can start that in our own capacity, or we can support this group who is doing excellent work by collecting data, and also they have made everything available, readily available for us, how to go about it. Templates are available. So users for like us, individuals can also contribute in that area. So that is how I think we individually can contribute to get more and more accessible products. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Thanks a lot. I think we as individuals need to be more aware to in order to avail assistive technologies. And uh, beyond individual, I think, as you rightly pointed out, if more and more decision makers are aware of the issue, if they are sensitized on the topic, then the change just comes on a whole new level, and it's like accessible to more and more people. So I would like to ask your opinions on the same, sir. Rakesh, sir, please.
Yeah, our friends are experts, and they covered everything. What else can I talk about? And that's the crux of what we need to do in a country like India with a large population of, maybe it's, I hear we talk about 130 crores. It might be now 135 or so. And what I feel personally is, along with all these, what Amar and Prashant have been talking about, is how we change the mindset, as rightly Amar pointed out, the attitude. That's one
Yeah.
part of thing that we live in. But to add a little bit to that is, how you teach the next generations. And now it's an attitudinal shift. But I want to look at, maybe once I become 60 or 70, is that my grandchildren or my children have that attitude of accessibility or thinking everyone alike equal right from their DNA. And when my kid play with a toy, he should be in a position to share that toy with a person who have autism, who has a person who has a vision loss. He should be able to play with all of his friends who have disabilities. Doesn't matter, for disability is just an aspect of life or a structural slash functional challenge, but every one of us have challenges, only that we think that is we are perfect. But every one of us have some or the other challenges, whether it may be disability or not, visible or not, attitudinal, psychological, etc., even the stress and so on and so forth. But if we have the culture that brings, right from the childhood, right from the baby kid stage, and that becomes like the de facto of how we grow our children, the next generation, um, I don't think there should be a requirement of attitudinal change in the future. At this in point in time, I think for the next 1-2 generations, we have to do that, because of the way we are grown up, because of the way we have been educated. The one of the, probably I'll just quickly summarize in, what I have a challenge as a digital accessibility professional, is the problem is not how someone learns something, but because they haven't learned. Say, if I take the web as an example, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript is the bare minimum basics a web developer learns, but they aren't aware while they were learning HTML that the alternative text can be put for an image. So because it is not in the educational system, they don't learn it, or they don't incorporate it, or the trainers who teach them aren't aware of it. So
Yeah.
that is the change that I want to see for the future, and that is how I believe everyone can be included at any point in time, irrespective of their disability.
Thank you very much, sir. I think it's important that even though there are differences in a society at a different levels, not just in terms of accessibility, I think differences provide us more and more possibilities as well. And as individuals, I think we need to be sensitive enough to recognize those possibilities to make a society a more inclusive space.
Absolutely. I
Yeah,
think for a country like India, differences is the strength, right? Diversity is
yeah,
the strength. So, irrespective of disability is one part of the diversity.
yeah. So thank you to all of you for sharing all these insights with us. I'm sure our listeners would highly benefit from these insightful discussion. And to our viewers, I would want to say that NAB Delhi will continue to organize more such discussions and workshops in the future. And for more details on our work, please visit nabdelhi.in or contact us as 9212319672. Thank you again for joining us today. It was a very fruitful discussion, and I hope to interact with you in the future. And
thank you for having us, Muskan, and appreciate the work that the NAB is doing. Thank you.
Thanks
Thank
a lot,
you,
sir.
and wishing all happy Global Accessibility Awareness Day.
Yep.
Same to you, sir.
Likewise.
Same
Thumbs
to
up.
you.
Thank
Have a
you.
good day, everyone.
Awesome.
Same to
See
you.
you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.